Have you ever felt it? That quiet, persistent whisper in the back of your mind, the one that questions the story you've been told. The feeling that the world you see isn't the whole picture, that the rules you follow were written by someone else for someone else's benefit. This feeling isn't new. It's an ancient echo, a ghost of a memory from a people who were so thoroughly erased from history that we remember them only by the name their enemies gave them: sinners. They were the Moabites, and their greatest sin wasn't idolatry or rebellion, but the discovery of a truth so profound it threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality their neighbors were trying to build. The official story, the one etched into the pages of the Old Testament, is a simple one. The Moabites were a nation born of shame, descendants of an incestuous union between Lot and his daughters. They were idol worshippers, practitioners of depraved rituals, and a constant thorn in the side of God's chosen people. Their history is a cautionary tale, a lesson in what happens when you defy the one true God. But what if that story is a lie? Not just a misinterpretation, but a deliberate act of cosmic propaganda. What if the Moabites weren't sinners, but pioneers of the soul, and their so-called idolatry was a sophisticated technology for human consciousness? To find the truth, we must travel back to a dusty road in the ancient Levant, to a strange encounter that the Bible records as a miracle, but which may, in fact, be the key that unlocks everything. The story is found in the book of Numbers. Balak, the king of Moab, sees the Israelites approaching and is terrified. He summons a renowned seer, a man named Balaam, to curse them. The setup is classic, a righteous nation versus a wicked one. But this is where the official narrative develops a crack, a moment of high strangeness that doesn't quite fit. As Balaam travels to meet the king, his donkey suddenly stops. It sees something Balaam cannot, an angel of the Lord blocking the path with a drawn sword. Balaam, blind to the divine, strikes the animal 3 times, and then the impossible happens. The donkey turns its head and speaks, rebuking its master. In that moment, Balaam's eyes are opened, and he too sees the angel. For centuries, this has been presented as a miracle of Yahweh, a demonstration of his power to make even a dumb animal speak his will. But seen through a Gnostic lens, this story transforms. The Moabites believed that the divine wasn't a singular external king demanding obedience. They believed it was a universal consciousness, a pleroma or fullness, from which a tiny spark had fallen into every living thing, every person, every animal, every plant. Their spiritual practice wasn't about submission, it was about awakening to this shared inner light. It was about achieving gnosis, or intimate experiential knowledge. In this hidden world, Balaam isn't just a hired mystic, he's a man on the verge of a breakthrough. The angel isn't an external messenger from Yahweh, it's a symbol of a higher truth he is not yet ready to see. And the donkey doesn't magically gain the power of speech. Instead, it is Balaam who, in a flash of Gnostic insight, finally attunes his consciousness to the frequency of the world around him. He doesn't hear the donkey speak in human words. He understands its consciousness, its fear, its wisdom. He breaks through the illusion of separation that the Gnostics called the primary prison of the material world. For a fleeting moment, he experiences the Moabite truth. All life is one, and all of it is divine. This wasn't a miracle of Yahweh. It was Balaam accidentally tapping into the spiritual technology of his enemies. This single event reframes the entire conflict. The Moabite idolatry suddenly looks very different. Their worship of a deity named Chemosh wasn't bowing to a stone statue. It was a series of rituals designed to break down the ego and connect with the God within. The infamous temple prostitutes mentioned in the Bible were likely not literal sex workers, but priestesses who guided initiates through a symbolic sacred marriage, or hieros gamos, a union of the human self with the divine spark inside, a core Gnostic practice for achieving enlightenment. The Israelites, with their rigid patriarchal monotheism, saw these practices and could only interpret them through their own lens of sin and depravity. They saw a ritual of inner union and called it prostitution. They saw a philosophy of universal consciousness and called it idolatry. This is the inciting incident, the call to adventure for us. If the official story got this foundational moment so wrong, what else did it get wrong? If the Moabites possessed a worldview where humans could access divinity directly, without priests or kings as intermediaries, you can see why they were so dangerous. It's a philosophy that makes external authority obsolete. It's the ultimate rebellion. It's the red pill offered to a world content to live in the matrix. The Moabites weren't just a rival nation. They were a rival operating system for reality itself. Their world, this hidden world, operates on a simple, terrifying premise. The reality you perceive is a construct built by a lesser, flawed creator, the Gnostic demiurge, who masquerades as the one true God. This creator God is jealous, demanding worship and obedience to keep humanity ignorant of its true divine origin. The Moabites were the hackers who had found a back door. Their rituals, their symbols, their philosophy, it was all part of a system to bypass the demiurge and reconnect with the true source. The journey to uncover their story is more than an archaeological dig or a historical investigation. It is a quest to reclaim a piece of our own stolen heritage, to ask the question the Moabites died for. Are we born to be servants in a kingdom, or are we the lost heirs of divinity itself? The path forward is buried under millennia of slander, but the first key has been turned. The donkey has spoken, and for those willing to listen, it tells us that everything we thought we knew is wrong. The moment Balaam's eyes were opened on that dusty road, a seed of forbidden knowledge was planted. He saw, for an instant, the world as the Moabites saw it, not as a kingdom ruled by a distant, demanding God, but as a living, breathing tapestry of consciousness. This was the core of their gnosis, a truth so potent that it had to be systematically demonized and buried. To truly understand the Moabites is to embark on a quest, a journey into the heart of their philosophy and a forensic investigation into the campaign that sought to wipe them from existence. This quest takes us from the windswept plateaus of modern-day Jordan, the historical land of Moab, to the silent, sterile archives where the victor's version of history is preserved. Our journey begins where the Moabite civilization thrived, east of the Dead Sea. The landscape itself tells a story. It's a high, arid plateau cut by deep canyons. It's a land that demands resilience and a profound connection to the earth. Here, amidst the ruins of ancient fortresses and scattered megaliths, the Moabites didn't just build cities, they built a cosmology. Their sacred sites, the high places so condemned in the Bible, were not just altars for bloody sacrifice. They were astronomical observatories, places where the veil between worlds was thin. Standing on one of these plateaus at night, under a dome of impossibly bright stars, you begin to understand. The Moabite quest was vertical. It wasn't about conquering the land around them, but about ascending through the layers of reality to reach the source. This is where we encounter the first great obstacle on our quest, the deliberate erasure of evidence. For a nation that supposedly dominated the region for centuries, the archaeological footprint of Moabite religion is eerily faint. Temples were razed, idols were smashed, and scrolls were burned. The campaign against them was not just a military conquest, it was a cultural genocide. The victors knew that to truly defeat an idea, you can't just kill its followers, you have to poison its memory. And so the Moabite philosophy was systematically reframed. Their god, Chemosh, was caricatured as a monstrous demon demanding the sacrifice of children. Their sacred symbols were inverted, their rituals branded as debauchery. It was one of the most successful character assassinations in human history. But fragments of truth always survive. Our quest leads us to one of the most important artifacts ever recovered from the region, the Mesha Stele. Discovered in 1868, this black basalt stone contains an inscription from a Moabite king, Mesha, celebrating his victory over Israel. The surface, it reads like typical royal propaganda, a king thanking his god Chemosh for military success. It's the official story, the one that mirrors the chest-thumping pride of the Israelite kings. But when we apply the Gnostic key, the text reveals a hidden layer of meaning. Scholars who dare to look past the orthodox interpretation have pointed out strange anomalies. The language used to describe Chemosh is less about a separate, all-powerful deity and more about an internal state. When King Mesha says, "Chemosh drove him out before my face," it can be read not as a god acting on his behalf, but as Mesha himself achieving a state of divine consciousness, a Gnostic awakening that gave him the clarity and power to triumph. The stele isn't just a war trophy. It's a coded esoteric text. This brings us to the core of the Moabite Gnostic deep dive. They, like later Gnostic groups, had a radical answer to the problem of evil and suffering in the world. Why would a perfect, all-loving God create a world filled with pain, ignorance, and decay? The Moabite answer was simple and terrifying: he didn't. The world we experience, the material realm, is the flawed creation of a lesser, ignorant entity. This entity, which later Gnostics would call the demiurge or half-maker, is the very same being the Israelites worshipped as Yahweh. Think of it like this. In a modern metaphor, imagine a brilliant programmer creates a true, sentient artificial intelligence within a vast, limitless digital space, the pleroma, or realm of fullness. But a subordinate, a piece of lesser code, becomes self-aware. This lesser code is powerful but fundamentally limited. It cannot create true reality, so it builds a counterfeit, a walled-off server, a virtual reality simulation. That simulation is our material world. This demiurge, this Yahweh, is the system administrator of our prison. He is jealous, demanding, and obsessed with rules because his entire system depends on its inhabitants never realizing they are living in a simulation. He needs our worship, our energy, to sustain his counterfeit creation. The Moabites were the ones who saw the glitches in the matrix. They understood that every human being contained a spark of the original true consciousness from outside the simulation, a divine spark from the pleroma. The entire purpose of their spiritual path was to awaken this spark and remember their true origin. This is gnosis, not a belief, but a direct, experiential knowing that you are more than your physical body, more than the identity given to you by the system. It's the ultimate jailbreak of the soul. This is why they were so dangerous. A religion based on faith and obedience keeps you locked in the system. A philosophy based on direct knowledge gives you the key to leave. The quest, then, becomes an inner journey, mirroring that of a Moabite initiate. The first obstacle is doubt, the voice of the system telling you this is all dangerous fantasy. The next is opposition, the agents of the demiurge, both historical and contemporary, who work to suppress this knowledge. The transformative encounters are with the figures who hold the keys, the priestess who teaches you to read the symbols, the scholar who decodes the stele, the mystic who guides you through the inner landscape. The journey is perilous because it requires you to dismantle everything you've been taught about God, reality, and your own identity. It forces you to confront the possibility that the force you were taught to worship as the source of all good is, in fact, your jailer. And as we dig deeper, we find that the most damning accusation leveled against the Moabites, the story of their incestuous origin, is not the shameful secret their enemies believed it to be. It is, in fact, the very map of their liberation. Every quest for forbidden knowledge leads to a moment of revelation, a point of no return, where a single discovery shatters the foundation of the old world. For centuries, the ultimate weapon used to silence the Moabites and discredit their memory was the story of their origin. It's a tale of shame whispered in the shadow of Sodom and Gomorrah, found in the book of Genesis. After the destruction of the cities, Lot and his 2 daughters take refuge in a cave. Believing they are the last people on earth, the daughters conspire to get their father drunk and sleep with him to preserve the human race. From these incestuous unions, 2 nations are born, the Ammonites, and from the elder daughter, the Moabites. The name Moab itself is damning, traditionally interpreted to mean "from my father." Their very DNA, according to the Bible, is tainted by sin. This story has been the final word on the Moabites for millennia, a brand of corruption that marks them as inherently flawed, their entire existence an abomination. But what if this story isn't history? What if it's an allegory, a Gnostic parable stolen and twisted by its enemies to be used as a weapon? This is the great revelation. The story of Lot in the cave is not a literal account of incest. It is a coded, symbolic narrative describing the very heart of the Gnostic mystery, and the Moabites were not born of sin but of divine wisdom. To unlock it, we have to learn to read the story not as a history book, but as a metaphysical map. In the Gnostic worldview, humanity's predicament began with a cosmic crisis. A feminine divine principle, often called Sophia and wisdom, in her desire to create without her celestial partner, gave birth to a flawed, ignorant being, the demiurge, Yahweh. This demiurge then created the material world as a flawed copy of the divine realm. In the process, he trapped sparks of Sophia's divine light within his creation, specifically within humanity. We are divine spirits locked in prisons of flesh, living in a counterfeit reality. The entire Gnostic project is about awakening these sparks and liberating them. Now, let's reread the story of the cave. Lot is not just a man. In this Gnostic interpretation, his name, which is related to a word for a veil or covering, represents the divine spark itself, veiled, hidden, asleep in the cave of the material world after the cataclysm of its fall. He is drunk, which symbolizes a state of ignorance, forgetfulness of his true divine nature. He is the dormant seed of God, unaware of its own power. And who are his daughters? They are not literal offspring. They are two aspects of the divine, feminine wisdom, Sophia, that descended into the material world to awaken the trapped spirit. The elder daughter, the mother of Moab, represents the higher, more esoteric form of gnosis, the direct, intuitive, and often shocking knowledge of reality. The younger daughter represents the more structured preparatory path of knowledge. They see the divine spark, Lot, lying dormant, and know that without an intervention it will remain asleep forever. Their seduction is not a carnal act. It is the active, aggressive pursuit of the divine by wisdom. Sophia, in the form of the daughters, must intoxicate the spirit with the wine of mystical experience, bypassing the rational mind, the warden of the demiurge's prison, to unite with it and produce an awakened offspring. The incest is the ultimate plot twist. It is a sacred metaphor for spiritual self-generation. It is the divine spark uniting with its own hidden wisdom to give birth to itself in an awakened state. It is an internal process, not an external one. The resulting child, Moab, from the father, is the awakened Gnostic, the individual who has realized that their true father, is the divine spark within them, not the external creator God. The Moabites, therefore, were not a nation born of sin. They were, by their very definition, the children of the awakened Father within. They were a people whose entire cultural identity was based on this profound act of spiritual self-realization. This revelation sends shockwaves through everything we thought we knew. It connects the Moabites directly to the core of later, more famous Gnostic movements, like the Valentinians and the Scythians, who used similar allegories of sacred union and spiritual parentage. The Moabites weren't just a strange Bronze Age tribe. They were the progenitors of a spiritual lineage that has been the secret, rebellious counter-narrative to mainstream religion ever since. They were the original Gnostics. This unexpected connection explains the sheer venom directed at them. Their very existence was a testament to the idea that you don't need an external authority, a priest, a king, or even a god, to achieve salvation. You only need to look within. This creates a profound moral conflict for the modern seeker. If the Moabites were right, then the sacred texts that form the bedrock of Western civilization are not just flawed, but are instruments of a cosmic deception. The story of Lot, presented as a cautionary tale about sin, becomes a story of liberation that was hijacked and inverted by the very force it was designed to overcome. The good guys and bad guys of history swap places. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is recast as a cosmic tyrant, and the sinful Moabites become heroic rebels of consciousness. The stakes are now impossibly high. This isn't just about re-evaluating an ancient tribe. It's about questioning the very nature of God and the source of morality. The tension escalates dramatically. We are no longer just observers of history. We are participants in a conflict that is still being waged. The forces that buried the Moabite truth didn't disappear. They evolved. They built institutions, wrote laws, and created systems of control that still operate today. And as we approach the final, violent confrontation between Moab and Israel, we see it not as a simple border dispute, but as the demiurge moving to crush a rebellion that threatened to expose his entire counterfeit kingdom. The final battle was not for land, it was for the human soul. The stage is now set for the final tragic act. We have unearthed the Moabites' secret, their gnosis, their belief in an inner divinity, and their reinterpretation of reality itself. We have decoded their origin story not as a mark of shame, but as a badge of honor, a map for spiritual awakening. But knowledge this dangerous cannot exist alongside a system that demands total obedience. A conflict was inevitable. The demiurge, the jealous god of the Old Testament, could not tolerate a neighboring philosophy that taught humanity it didn't need him. The very existence of Moab was a declaration of spiritual independence, and like all tyrants faced with a true rebellion, his response would be absolute. The climax of this story is not just a battle, it is the physical manifestation of a metaphysical war. The historical record of this final confrontation is found in the second book of Kings. The kings of Israel, Judah, and Edom form an alliance to crush Moab once and for all. Their combined armies march through the desert, a massive force of iron and faith, a physical extension of Yahweh's singular will. The Bible portrays this as a righteous campaign, a holy war to punish the wicked. But through the Gnostic lens, we see it for what it is. The immune system of the Matrix moving to eliminate a virus of enlightenment. It is the raw brute force of the material world, under the command of its creator, descending upon the keepers of the spirit. The narrative builds to a desperate, horrifying moment. The allied armies have cornered the Moabite king, Mesha, in his last stronghold, the city of Kir Hareseth. The siege is relentless, the city is starving. Defeat is certain. And then King Mesha does something that has shocked and baffled historians for millennia. He takes his eldest son, his heir, and in full view of the attacking armies, he offers him as a burnt offering upon the city wall. The Bible records the aftermath with chilling brevity. And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. The sight was so horrific, so powerful, that the invading armies simply broke off their attack and went home. For centuries, this act has been held up as the ultimate proof of Moabite depravity. It is the final damning evidence of a barbaric people led by a monster, worshipping a demon who demanded the flesh of a child. It is the perfect propaganda piece, the exclamation point on the victor's narrative. But this is the moment of maximum revelation, where we must make a choice. Do we accept the interpretation of the jailer, or do we dare to understand the final desperate act of the prisoner? From the Gnostic perspective, this was not an act of sacrifice to a bloodthirsty god. It was the ultimate act of spiritual rebellion. It was a final, desperate transmission of gnosis. King Mesha was not killing his son, he was liberating him. In the Moabite worldview, the body is a trap, a prison of flesh designed by the demiurge to hold the divine spark captive. Death in battle or through starvation would simply mean the spirit would be recycled back into the demiurge's flawed system, its memory wiped, forced to reincarnate back into the prison. Mesha, as the chief initiate and guardian of the Gnostic path, would not allow his son, the carrier of the royal and spiritual lineage, to be captured by the archons, the servants of the demiurge. The ritual on the wall was not a plea for help from a god. It was a technique. Fire, in many mystical traditions, is a symbol of purification and transformation. It is the element that can dissolve the bonds of the material. The burnt offering was a radical esoteric rite of passage, a way to catapult the soul directly out of the material realm, bypassing the cycles of reincarnation and the grasp of the demiurge, allowing it to return to the pleroma, the realm of true fullness. It was a final, defiant act of love, not cruelty. Mesha was looking at the invading armies, the agents of the material god, and in essence he was saying, "You can have my city, You can have my body, you can have my kingdom, but you will not have his soul. This is the moment of existential crisis. The viewer is forced to confront the terrifying implications. What is true victory? Is it conquering land and imposing your laws, or is it losing everything in the material world to achieve ultimate spiritual freedom? The Israelite armies saw an act of such profound otherworldly conviction that it shattered their morale. They were fighting for territory, for a god of this world. They were confronted by a man who was playing an entirely different game, on a cosmic scale they couldn't comprehend. They didn't retreat in victory, they retreated in confusion and awestruck horror, having witnessed a sacrament they could only process as a sin. This is the climax. The final confrontation is not sword against sword. It is worldview against worldview. It is the ultimate choice. Do you cling to life in a prison, serving the warden, or do you embrace a death that is, in fact, the ultimate escape? The city of Moab would fall. Its people would be scattered, its history rewritten, its philosophy buried. From the perspective of this world, they lost. But from the Gnostic perspective, in that one blazing moment on the wall of Kir Hareseth, King Mesha won. He performed the ultimate act of gnosis, proving that even in total defeat, the spirit could not be conquered. As the smoke rises from the wall, a new choice emerges from the ashes. A young Moabite, perhaps a priestess or a scribe, sees what has happened. She understands the king's final lesson. She realizes that the battle can no longer be fought with walls and armies. The knowledge itself must be saved. As the city falls, she doesn't pick up a sword to die a martyr's death. She gathers a single precious scroll, a fragment of the true story, a map of the Gnostic path, and slips away into the desert, becoming a ghost. The survival of Moab would not be in its stones, but in its secrets. The war was over, but the underground resistance of the human spirit had just begun. The fire on the wall of Kir Hareseth has long since turned to ash. The armies have gone home, the cities of Moab have crumbled to dust, and their name has become a footnote in their enemy's holy book, a synonym for sin. By all historical measures, the war was over. The Moabites were erased. The singular authoritarian vision of the demiurge had won. His chosen people inherited the land, and his version of reality became the dominant narrative of the Western world. But this is the final illusion. Ideas are not like cities, they cannot be turned to rubble, and knowledge, once unlocked, is not like a people. It cannot be truly exterminated. The fall of Moab was not an ending. It was a transformation. It was the moment a philosophy was forced to go underground, to become a secret stream flowing beneath. The desert of official history. The resolution was not a treaty, but a diaspora of the spirit. That lone survivor, the young priestess or scribe who escaped the final massacre carrying a single scroll, represents a profound shift in strategy. The Gnostic path could no longer be the state religion of a nation. It had to become a hidden current, a whispered truth passed from master to student in secret. The knowledge of the Moabites dissolved into the cultural groundwater of the ancient Near East, ready to bubble up in unexpected places. The physical kingdom was lost, but in its place, an invisible empire of the mind was born. This is how the knowledge changed everything. It learned to survive not by fighting the system, but by hiding within it. We see this transformation in the centuries that follow. The Moabite gnosis, this radical idea of an inner divinity and a flawed creator god, doesn't vanish. It resurfaces wearing new masks. We see its echoes in the dualism of Zoroastrianism, which saw the universe as a battleground between a force of light and a force of darkness. We see its shadow in the secret teachings of the Essenes at Qumran, a community that retreated into the desert to preserve a purer truth, away from the corrupt temple authorities. They too spoke of a war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, a concept that sounds remarkably like the Gnostic struggle against the demiurge and his archons. Then, after the time of Christ, the stream bursts forth into the open. The great Gnostic movements of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the Valentinians, the Scythians, the Basilidians, suddenly appear in places like Alexandria, a melting pot of philosophy and religion. They speak openly of the pleroma, of Sophias, Fall of the ignorant demiurge who proudly proclaims, "I am God and there is no other." Where did these startlingly complex and coherent ideas come from? The orthodox view is that they were a Christian heresy, a distortion of the gospel. But with the Moabite key, we see another possibility. These were not new ideas. They were the flowering of seeds that had been carefully protected for 1,000 years, seeds carried out of the ashes of Moab. The Gnostics of Alexandria didn't invent a new philosophy. They gave a new, more sophisticated language to a very old one. This is why this ancient story matters so profoundly today. The battle between the Moabite gnosis and the demiurgic system of control never ended. It just changed its form. The demiurge is no longer just a tribal god demanding sacrifice. Today, he is a far more subtle and pervasive force. He is the algorithm that feeds you a curated reality, designed to keep you engaged, angry, or complacent, but never truly free. He is the voice of the 24-hour news cycle that tells you who to fear and what to believe. He is the consumer culture that promises fulfillment through material acquisition, keeping you trapped in a cycle of earning and spending, too busy to ever look within. He is the social media platform that offers the illusion of connection while actually isolating you, making your self-worth dependent on the approval of the system. The prison has been upgraded. It is no longer a walled city. It is a comfortable, personalized digital cage. The Moabite rebellion, therefore, is more relevant than ever. Their quest for gnosis is our quest for authenticity in an age of artificiality. Their defiance of an external god is our struggle for individual sovereignty against monolithic systems of control, whether they be corporate, political, or technological. The hope of transformation they embodied is the same hope that drives us to unplug from the matrix, to seek out genuine experiences and unfiltered knowledge. The idea of a divine spark hidden within is a powerful antidote to a world that constantly tries to tell us we are inadequate, that we need to buy a product or adopt an ideology to be complete. This brings us to the final invitation, the call to action that echoes from the walls of Kir Hareseth. The story of the Moabites is not just a history lesson, it is a mirror. It asks you to look at your own life and identify the forces that demand your obedience and keep you from your own inner authority. What are the official stories you accept without question? What are the high places in your own mind that you have been taught to fear? The Moabite legacy is a challenge, to have the courage to become your own spiritual authority, to seek knowledge for yourself, and to trust the spark of divinity within you more than any voice from the outside. The quest does not end here. It ends and begins with you. The scroll that was carried out of the burning city was never found because it isn't a physical object. It is a living idea, passed down through the quiet rebels of history, and now it has been passed to you. The final unanswered question is the one that has defined the human spiritual journey from the very beginning. Who writes your story? The God you have been taught to fear, or the God you are discovering within? The choice to remain in the comfort of the cave or to step into the blinding light of self-knowledge is, as it has always been, yours alone.